Bienvenue à tous. Welcome to Reporters here on France 24. The people of Scotland are about to have their say on their future, but will what's already a clear and strong sense of national identity turn into an independent nation? Okay, no, that is the question. Scotland is on the brink, and with it the future of the United Kingdom. So is a constitutional crisis about to be unleashed on the British? Our reports by Chris Moore and Sylvain Rousseau.
Bagpipes, tartan, tweed on the way to the Highland Games in Oban. With a referendum on independence looming, the scene looks very patriotic. But just how Scottish is it? In the procession are some of the region's biggest landowners, among them a member of the British nobility, which symbolises the union between Scotland and England of 1707. Not all the onlookers are impressed.
The Duke of Argyll was in the procession and different chiefs of clans. And I think they only really come basically once a year.
For these activists, it's yes to leaving the UK, no to what they say is an archaic charade.
It's a part of Scotland, but it's not the real Scotland. It's a Victorian myth in this country that's been kept on almost poverty survival rations from Westminster government for such a long time. Time of change is coming.
The competition underway, caper tossing tops a bit of event celebrating the Scottish spirit. But for some in the crowd, a country which already has considerable autonomy simply isn't strong enough to cope on its own.
I perfectly see why. It would seem like a really good proposition and patriotic and nice to be called your own country and control yourselves, but it's a dream.
For many Scots, there's no contradiction between pride in their cultural identity and wanting to maintain a relationship with Westminster that's lasted over 300 years.
It's just very traditional and it's lovely. I'm voting no. Because I don't think it's a good idea for Scotland to go alone. I think we're better to stay together as a country.
Away from this postcard Scotland, campaigners are locked in a far more contemporary battle. The referendum debates about democracy, economics, social issues and public services. On the outskirts of Edinburgh, the Yes camp seeking to persuade people to take a leap into the unknown.
For Scotland's independence, yes.
Yes activists here say British governments have long sidelined Scotland's needs and that London, 500 kilometres south, feels much further away with the Conservatives in power.
Somebody was telling me earlier in the last 70 years we've had 38 Tory governments and Scotland never votes Tory, or it hasn't done for a long, long time. We're actively out there doing stuff to try and persuade people that a yes vote will make Scotland a more prosperous country.
Star campaigner Chris Laws repainted his 1950s British Army Green Goddess fire engine in the light blue of the Yes camp. He's on tour promoting a cause he says is about defending Scots from neoliberalism, austerity and privatisation.
Actually, the values of campaigning for are traditional British values. It's the values of what our parents and grandparents argued and debated for and wanted straight after the war and achieved. Free healthcare, free childcare, free education, jobs, and a situation where they feel they're looking after the most vulnerable and poor in society.
Meeting people, trying to make up minds. 1 in 10 Scottish voters are undecided as the campaign enters its final month. Chris sees a unique opportunity to vote for social justice.
It's the only way we're going to build a good society. I mean that. It's the only way you're going to do it.
The arguments they make are valid, they're strong, but I'm still not convinced yet. I think I will be, but you know, I could be convinced by my heart at the minute, but I want to be convinced by practicality of the situation as well. Good to meet you.
Yeah, pleasure. Likewise.
Look after yourself.
Take care. Cheers.
And the practicality of the situation is at the forefront of the debate as teacher Rory bids Chris farewell.
How old is she? 60.
The No side says Chris's dream of a better society will remain just that unless the Yes camp gets its economic calculations right. Scottish First Minister Alex Salmond wants to keep the British pound after independence. London says it won't let him. Salmond claims that's a bluff. Some business people are spooked by this currency uncertainty. In Edinburgh, we meet Daniel Johnson. He runs a chain of homeware, stationery and gift stores founded by his father.
So my dad started literally with £100 in his back pocket, making and selling his own furniture. And he started in one of these basements here. As business grew, he also bought kind of additional properties and opened different types of store, which is why we now ended up with 5 different shops.
Daniel's standing for the Scottish Parliament with Labour, the UK's main centre-left party. He says quitting the union would spell disaster for the family business and for Scotland's economy.
Basically, Britain is really good for business. 90% of our suppliers are based in the rest of the UK. The other 10% are based in the EU. Now, for every invoice that I settle with a foreign supplier, I get charged £15 by the bank. Now, if all my suppliers I had to pay that sort of fee, that would massively increase our costs. And that would be a big burden for small business.
From small business to big business back in the Highlands, where demand's booming for Scotland's most iconic product. Scotch whisky accounts for a quarter of all UK food and drink exports, and last year brought in €5.4 billion in overseas sales. At the independent Edward Dower distillery, Scotland's smallest, they do things the old-fashioned way. Manager Des shows us through the process: brewing, cooling.
This technology is from the 19th century. It's a Morton refrigerator.
Next, it's fermentation.
That has been cooled and is now being passed into the washback. Not many distilleries now use these. We're very committed to maintaining the traditional equipment at Edward Dower.
90,000 litres of whisky are made here every year, a tiny amount in a business dominated by big international companies. Owner Andrew Symington says the prospect of a yes vote has got the big names worried about losing the UK's economic and diplomatic clout.
The industry generally is not behind independence. Yeah, there could be a number of reasons for that. Most of them are multinationally owned. Their headquarters aren't in Scotland anyway. Their headquarters are in London or even other countries.
As far as Andrew's concerned, global clients will appreciate his single malts regardless of what happens on September the 18th, when he won't be voting.
I can predict what my whiskey's going to turn out like, but I have no idea what the country will turn out like. I'm not a politician. I'm a whiskey maker with my own spirit of independence.
Whatever the result, wherever the profits end up, jobs will stay. Scotch whisky can only be made in Scotland. The future's less certain for the country's #1 resource. UK North Sea oil fields brought big money to Aberdeen and lie almost entirely off the Scottish coast. The Yes camp wants to make sure the industry remains a major earner after independence, but despite the possibility of untapped riches west of Shetland, experts warn supplies are dwindling.
The North Sea has got reserves, depends who you ask, but maybe somewhere in the region, Oil and Gas UK would say, of 24 billion barrels of recoverable reserves. They believe that will take us maybe out for another 50 or more years. But as time goes on, these resources deplete and go away.
The oil companies are keeping a low profile during the referendum campaign, saying what they want most of all is stability. But their demands from whoever wins will be the same.
Costs have been rising in a way that's unsustainable. The tax is complex and needs to be simplified and also needs to be sort of redesigned in a way that encourages companies like Total to continue to invest in a mature basin like the North Sea.
With around €8 billion a year in tax revenue at stake, maritime borders will be a major issue in negotiations with London should Scotland vote yes. We catch up again with Chris and his fire engine. Oil revenues are part of the independence movement's plans for funding social policy. And for this financial advisor and member of the Business for Yes group, Scotland has plenty to fall back on economically.
Big thing people want to know is, are we wealthy enough? Which the answer is yes. I've shown the numbers. Last 33 years, we've always produced more than we've actually spent.
Independence, says Chris, would serve as an example south of the border.
If Scotland can achieve half of its aspirations by becoming independent, I think it will shake up the rest of UK politics as well.
For Chris, this campaign's already shaken part of an apathetic UK electorate into believing they can be masters of their own destiny. When the referendum was announced, the Yes camp lagged heavily in the polls. So does he really believe it can win?
Yes, definitely. And we can never be certain, but the direction over the last two and a half years, from 28-30% to now 45 to 48, has only went one direction. And it is because we have the good case, we have the right case. We now have a politicised society, and they know they want change.
Faced with this advance, the anti-independence Better Together campaign is canvassing hard on the streets of Edinburgh, with mixed results.
Have you decided who you're going to vote in the referendum yet?
Yes, I have, yes. I'm afraid I will disappoint you.
That's all. That's your privilege.
Yes.
Retired Postmaster Bill says Scotland already has considerable devolved powers and could get more even after a no vote. For him, the Yes camp's arguments are irrational.
The ones who react more emotionally are the people who tend to be Yes supporters. Independence is a solution looking for a problem. Whatever the problem, whether it's the health service, whether it's the economy, whether it's jobs, the answer is independence, without much thought.
For these campaigners, the UK is a win-win formula for Scotland, allowing a country of just over 5 million people to maintain its distinctiveness and compete internationally.
I'm passionate about being British, and I think Britain as a united whole is one of the strongest and most successful countries in the world, and I want to keep that way.
But Scots are increasingly divided by a conversation that's taking place in homes, workplaces and pubs. Regulars here in Leith watch the final TV debate between Alex Salmond and Better Together's Alistair Darling. And as the beers go down, passions rise. 3 weeks from the referendum, concerns are centred on currency uncertainty and fears over privatisation of the National Health Service, on caution versus idealism.
I lived in Europe off and on since 1970, in Norway, Denmark, Holland, Germany, Belgium. And the social side of it, far superior to Britain will ever have. I want to be independent, that's it. Not because I don't like the English, because I don't like Westminster.
It's just that the currency, for one thing, like they were going to use pounds or sterling or whatever it may be, I'll vote no, but I think it might just edge towards yes, unfortunately.
One key constituency is not allowed to drink alcohol in pubs. In a first for the UK, 16 and 17-year-olds are being allowed to vote, and some of them are performing a play at the Edinburgh Festival, on an event which has got young people thinking and joking.
You remind me of the referendum.
How?
I think we'd be better together, babes.
From the next generation, hopes, fears and doubts.
There's still so many things I don't know. Will we just mess it all up? Will it be like a horrible divorce? That's my DVD. No, I think you'll find that's my DVD. There's so many questions and uncertainties, and it's coming right at us.
Even if it is a no, I think there'll still be change. I think it's really exciting.
And what about
one side of me really wants it to become independent. At the same time, it could go tits up. If I vote no, and if I keep the status quo, it still could go tits up. So either way, you're literally tits up.
With Scotland's future in the balance, Europe's independence movements are watching closely. So is Westminster, where a Conservative Prime Minister risks losing a tenth of the UK's population and a third of its landmass.
Chris Moore's joined us here in the studio. Chris, looking ahead to the 18th, things, it's fair to say, closer than many had predicted.
That's right, our report was filmed at the end of August. Things have moved on fast since then. You've got to remember that a year or so ago, it was considered very unlikely that Scotland would vote yes. There's since then been a first survey coming out saying 51% for the pro-independence camp, causing what Alex Salmond, the Scottish First Minister, says is panic amongst the Westminster establishment. We've seen the Prime Minister David Cameron and the leaders of the two other main parties hot-footing it to Edinburgh for a bit of a love-in with the Scottish to extol the virtues of the Union. David Cameron's been flying the Saltire, the Scottish flag, above number 10 Downing Street. Salmond are saying, well, it's all very nice to offer us extra devolution now, which is what those main party leaders have been doing. If you really meant it, you would have done it earlier, and it's too late to panic, essentially.
Some saying their heart says vote yes, others saying their heart says vote no. Is this a common dichotomy you found?
It's obviously been a complex campaign in which lots of issues have come up on both sides. That said, it has been a very emotional debate at times, particularly on the yes side. It's been a genuine grassroots campaign which has infused a lot of people. It's a bit of a cliche to say that you hear people talking about this everywhere, you know, pubs, in the streets, etc. But that really is true. You overhear snippets of conversation everywhere, people talking about the referendum. At the same time, the no side has come under quite a lot of flack for essentially negative campaigning. You could say it's always difficult to argue a negative. Some of their critics have said they should have made more of a positive question, voting yes to the United Kingdom, an arrangement which the no camp says gives Scotland economic clout and stability much above its population of 5 million. Head versus heart, perhaps. And that's what we've seen in the final weeks of the campaign, with the British establishment, if you like, Cameron, etc., making this quite emotional plea to the Scottish not to split up a family of nations.
They've made it clear, both sides, what it means for Scotland. How about what it means for Britain?
You're talking about a constitutional crisis there. We don't know what's going to happen if Scotland does vote yes. First of all, there's going to be an enormous amount on the negotiating table in the 18 months or so before which Scotland will become officially independent, if you like. There are a few things we didn't have time to talk about in our report. The Trident nuclear submarine, for example, the SNP want that out of Scotland. That's going to be one of the things that are going to be talked about. Oil, the economy, institutions, a constitution. At the same time, David Cameron, the UK Prime Minister, faces the prospect of being a Conservative leader who lost a fairly sizable part of his country. If he did lose it, he'd also lose 59 primarily left-voting MPs, which would be to his advantage, although he wouldn't necessarily celebrate that publicly. And of course, Europe is watching. Plenty of independence movements across Europe have got their eye on this. Europe watching too to decide whether or not Scotland, as an independent nation, if that's what does happen, would be let in.
Chris, we need to leave it there, but I can sense there's much more to come on this story. Of course, the vote on September the 18th. Chris Moore with the story, Sylvain Rousseau assisting him. Thank you for watching this Reporters programme. You can see it again on our website, francevinquette.com. Stay with us here on France 24.